So good morning, I'm Rob Young. I'm with the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce on the Government Affairs Committee. And good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you, Barbara.
How are you?
I'm doing good. And the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce is the catalyst for business growth in our community, the convener of leaders and influencers, and the champion for business growth on the east side. We advocate our business community knowing that it's the business economy that ensures the economic vitality of the community itself. It is important that our local leadership and the chamber work closely together, ensuring a stable, healthy environment for business. Balancing the needs of community to a realistic budget is a top priority. The chamber has compiled a series of questions for our candidates running for council to help us establish a solid understanding of the business community's needs, understanding your perception of those needs and how you might plan to address them. Your question and answer session will be recorded and shared with our community via our website, YouTube, Facebook, email, newsletter. It's going to be broadcasted. So first of all, to start out, what is, if you could tell us your name and the seat that you're running for?
Okay, I'm Barbara de Michele, and I'm running for position number 3.
Number 3, okay.
Yes.
And how long have you been a resident of Issaquah?
I arrived here in 1985, so I'm going on with my 35th year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you currently work?
Currently, I am the business manager working part-time at the garage. I was a founding member of the garage, which is the new teen cafe that is in Issaquah, right across from the community center. And so prior to that, I retired from King County Department of Transportation in 2010. I've spent 17 years there as a community relations planner.
Okay. So what is your business experience as an owner of a business?
So this was a really good question because it took me back. I arrived in Spokane in 1980. My husband and I separated at that point. I was a single mom, and even though I had a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in education, there was a state freeze on hiring at the time. So I was being offered jobs at the minimum wage at that point that was $4.25 an hour. So I decided, I had a writing background and had done a lot of freelance writing, and I decided to start my own business. And started with a number of contacts that I had in the area. I was doing copywriting and just kind of working my way into that. And I was charging the princely a sum of $12 an hour. But it was better than $4.25 an hour. So at that point, the chamber in Spokane was a difficult group to get into. The fees were quite expensive and so forth. So I joined a small women's group that was run by a lot of women that were also running their own businesses, and through that offered a lot of classes. And so I just plunged in and took every class that I could and read every book that I could, and learned all about revenue and expenses and all of that. Mm-hmm. So I operated that consulting firm for about 5 years. And then I continued operating it after I moved here to Issaquah, and worked on it until I got the job with King County Department of Transportation. So over time, I think I had 13 or 14 regular clients, and so yes, it was quite an experience. But it was a great learning experience and a way to learn all about running a business. You know?
Okay. What is your experience, if you've had any experience with budgets and profit and loss statements, balance sheets?
Yes, and so in addition to that experience, I've been, I was the executive director for what was known as the Issaquah Community Network. I was asked to take that position after I retired from King County. I've also been on the board of the Together Center in Redmond for the past 10 years. So very familiar with budgets, profit and loss statements, and balance sheets through those two organizations. And then I spent 2 terms on the Issaquah school board, and 2 of those years I was president of the school board. I think currently the school district budget is around 200 million. At the time I was on the board, it was around 135 million. And of course, we reviewed the budget on a monthly basis. We had a very excellent finance and budget director who was there to assist us with that large budget, but very familiar with looking at budgets from both small and large organizations.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 2 minutes, could you tell us what your experience would be if you were elected to the city council and what qualifications you would bring to the city council?
Well, I think my 35 years in Issaquah is one of the qualifications because I've been very active in the community the entire time. I've been giving a stump speech talking about how 4 months after I arrived here, I was offered the opportunity to be on the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce board, which was just amazing to me because coming from Spokane, where you had to be very wealthy to be on the chamber board, and also in 1985 it was all men. I was just amazed, and I thought this is such a wonderful community, and the opportunities here are so great to get involved and give back to your community. I was just thrilled, and I think at that point I decided I wanted to stay here for the rest of my life. I was on the chamber board for 9 years, and I have a long list of other community activities on the board for At Work, which was the sheltered workshop here in town, school board background, all of that. So I've lived in the community for many, many years and been active and know the community very well. So I think that's one experience. I think my 17 years at the King County Department of Transportation, I was a community relations planner and had to work all around Puget Sound with a whole variety of communities on both transit and roads projects. I think that is a tremendous background to bring to the council. And then finally, my last 9 years after retiring from King County, I've been working on youth substance abuse prevention and promoting youth mental health in the Issaquah area as Issaquah Community Network. I work through the foundation and now at the garage. It's kind of been a continuum, all of it looking at-risk youth in our community. So those are the experiences that I bring into the council.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
The Chamber is a catalyst and a champion for the business community, and the economic vitality of any community is reliant on the healthy business sector. As a city councilman, how do you see your relationship with the Chamber and the business community?
City councilwoman.
Yes. They wrote man.
I know, I'm giving you a bad time. As I said, I was on the Chamber of Commerce board for 9 years and absolutely believe that the Chamber is vital to the health of this community and would support it in every way that I could. It's a wonderful organization. I've also worked quite a bit with the Downtown Issaquah Association and the concerns about Front Street and that particular business community, the historic district. And I live just south of Issaquah on Front Street, so I know that corridor very, very well and the businesses along there. So, you know, as you said in your opening statement, business is foundational to the health of our community, and I would hope to have a very excellent relationship with the business community. I have received the endorsement of the Seattle King County Realtors and the Affordable Housing Council, which is the Master Builders Association. Both of them have given me their endorsement for my campaign.
Okay. It's been reported, we're going to change subjects a bit.
Yeah.
It's been reported that Issaquah faces a $1.5 million deficit in 2019 and that the deficit could be as high as $5 million in 2020. Economic indicators show a slowing of our economy, that we have a number of businesses closing or moving out of the area that apparently have doubled in 2019 versus 2018. So these are serious challenges that the council will face. What are your plans to balance the budget? In addition, we'd like to include your position on B&O taxes.
Yes. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the proposed sales tax as well.
Okay.
So, this is a many different aspects to this answer, but so let's just talk specifically about the budget situation first. I think the very first thing we have to have as going into that process is good numbers. And I sat in on the economic forecast meeting that they held, where our new finance director, Beth Goldberg, was explaining how the budget has had some real issues in terms of its development. She gave the example of, those little claw machines that you pick up candy and, all right. So the city received last year $325 in tax revenue from those little claw machines. The budget had in it projected that they were going to receive $28,000. And so Beth's question was, where did that $28,000 come from? And she couldn't track down where it had come from. So before we do anything, we have to have really good numbers. And I know that she is working and the mayor is supporting that work of really going through that budget with a fine-tooth comb and coming up with the right numbers so we know exactly what kind of shortfall we've got. So when we have those good numbers, then I think the very next thing we have to do is we have to decide, what are our values and goals in going forward. Of course, the goal would be to balance the budget, but how you do that, there are different statements that we could make. Are we going to protect our employees? Are we going to protect our core services, which are the health, welfare, and safety of the community? What are the values that we're going to try to project as we're going through this budget balancing process? And then having gone through some severe, shortfalls in other organizations, when I first arrived here, the Issaquah School District went through one of those, and they did kind of a line-by-line kind of review. I was also with King County after the 2008 recession, and they did just a wage freeze, a hire freeze, and a 3% cut across the board. Kind of a blunt instrument, but it does have the effect of bringing all the employees together. We're all being treated the same. So there are various ways that you can approach it, and I think that how you approach it starts with those value statements of what you want to achieve. If you're protecting your safety, health, and welfare functions of your city, perhaps they don't get cut at all, and you cut out of other parts. So I think that process is really important. The number of businesses closing or moving out of the area has doubled, and I think that is another part of my campaign. The top priority I have is affordable housing and the affordability in the area. And I've talked to people over and over and over again who are having difficulty with recruitment and retention of employees. There was just a post to a Facebook page where a business had closed temporarily because they didn't have enough employees. A couple days prior, another business had closed because they didn't have enough employees. Talking to a Swedish hospital, talking to the school district. We have a real issue with affordability, and can people move here and take jobs, and does it pencil out for them to live here when the housing prices are so high? And so I'd like to see the city move forward and much more aggressively in bringing affordable, or what we call workforce housing, to the city. And the tax situation, of course, is a whole different situation, as we have a very, very regressive tax system. Personally, I've never liked the way Washington State does its B&O taxes. So I would be looking at that. I did go online to see how we rate with cities around us, and it appears that our B&O taxes here are very similar to our fellow cities. But I think if we're talking about B&O taxes in general, and that would be a state issue, is how those are collected, and the fact that that's off the top of your income and not on your net has always bothered me. It's being proposed that we might have a 0.02 sales tax for the transportation benefit district in the area. I'm very leery of that proposal. I don't think sales tax is a good way to pay for capital projects, and so at this point, at least, I'm opposed to that as well.
All right. So, TIP, which has been a top priority for the council this year, knowing that transportation is a regional concern, the recent ruling against Sound Transit's car tab fees and our current budget concerns, where would you rate our priority for the TIP in 2020, and what results would you personally like to see from it?
So I'm always, my background at King County Department of Transportation and working with roads, and especially after the impact of I-695, if you remember, that did huge damage to our ability to do roads projects. My top concern is always maintenance. We have a road system, and it needs to be maintained. And if you don't maintain it, it becomes very expensive to redo it. So my top priority looking through the TIP is the maintenance projects that they have there. Now, for people who don't know, the Transportation Improvement Project List is not necessarily funded. It's a planning document. And so what actually gets into the budget, I would support, with big caveat, I would support the light at Providence Point. I go there often, and I know how unsafe coming out of either the one on the left or the right, how either one of those are problematical, and there's going to be a car accident there someday. And the roundabout at the bottom of that hill, I agree that those need to be done. The caveat is, if Tim Imes' new initiative gets passed, and if we have the shortfall at the city and we have to balance, we'll have to see, does all of this work together? But that project was promised to the Providence Point people a long time ago. It's never been done. It is definitely a safety issue, so that would be my top priority there. Similarly, the South Cove, with sidewalks and widening that road and making it safer, was promised to the South Cove people a long time ago. It also needs to be a top consideration, absolutely. Can we get those into the budget with the shortfall that's projected? We're going to have to wait and see. We've got a lot of things in the air.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what is your perception of the permitting process in Issaquah, and how do you see that it can be improved?
So I've been here for 35 years, and I've never heard anyone say that the permitting process is a good process. I've heard for years that it's difficult and cumbersome. And so, however, what can I do as a council member? Because the permitting process, I believe, is the executive function of the city and would be under the mayor and the administration's purview. The job of the council is to pass the codes and the regulations that they then have to implement. And how they do that implementation is really an administrative function. So I guess that I would be looking at that and seeing if I could suggest ways that it could be improved, but that really is not the council's function to run that permitting office.
All right. So the state happens to be evaluating changes to overtime rules. L&I's current proposal is to increase the threshold for executives and admins and professionals who earn over $23,660 per year. Those are the federal guidelines. Or 13,000 happens to be state guidelines. The state has actually proposed to increase the income level to 80,000 by 2026. So the question is, does the business support an increase to a threshold given it hasn't been increased for quite a while? And if so, what would be recommended?
Yes, well, I'm going to admit that this is one that I don't have a lot of background in. It also says, would this proposal affect your business? And currently the garage, it would not, I don't believe it would affect us at all. We are under the wings right now of Friends of Youth, and there is overtime pay, but it's on a per weekly basis, not on a total income basis. So it wouldn't affect the business that I'm currently in. And I don't think that I have enough background for that question to really answer it knowledgeably. So,
all right.
yeah.
So, last question. We'd like to thank you for your time today. And we'd like to leave this last question to be open-ended, so that you might speak directly to the business community that's going to be part of this. If you were to be elected to City Council, please tell our business community what you would do to support the business and ensure the economic vitality.
So I think we have two big barriers to economic vitality, and they are my two top issues and my two top priorities for my campaign. And the first one I've already mentioned is affordability, and the affordability of housing for a workforce in our area, and how are we going to attract good people, continue to attract good people, good employees here, and be able to retain them, because the other thing that I hear is that we may be able to bring good employees here. It's a very attractive area to live, it's a beautiful area, and unfortunately they find it financially untenable to live here. And so, for example, at the fire district, talking to them, they train people, they get them all trained, and then they go and work for another fire district that's closer to their home where they don't have the long commute. Mm-hmm. And so there goes many thousands of dollars in training out the door. So I think that we need to really look at how we can bring more affordable housing here. I'm a strong supporter of the Opportunity Center that's being proposed near the transit center, which would be workforce housing. Again, it would be for people making in the $60,000 to $80,000 range. Our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, the nurses at Swedish, those folks who have these long commutes right now and would have a hard time finding any housing that is adequate. My other top priority is transportation, and I do believe that there are, because right now, as you know, if you're on Front Street at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you're not going anywhere, and I know that it's a barrier because people will do things to go around the business community. They just don't want to get stuck in that traffic, and it lasts from about 2:30 in the afternoon till about 7. So we have to start figuring out what are we going to do to allow people to flow evenly through town. Mm-hmm. I do think there are improvements that can be made to our roads, and that we need to be looking for ways to make the traffic flow better. But if we are really going to solve this problem in our lifetime and really tackle it, we have to be starting to look at all the different options we can have for transit. And when I say transit, I'm talking about all the alternatives that we can include under that umbrella. It means making our bus service more effective. Right now we have a lack of connections going north and south. It means encouraging people to use buses more, get our usage up, because we have capacity in some of the buses that we have right now. It means that we have to look at alternatives like van pooling and carpooling and rideshare. And because the way that we grew Issaquah, we have a lot of hills and valleys and cul-de-sacs, and so transit is not going to be able to actually effectively serve all of those, but we can do things to get into neighborhoods, get into those cul-de-sacs, and help people leave their car at home and do that. We need to increase bicycle paths, walking paths. We need to encourage employers to allow their employees to telecommute. My son works for REI. He telecommutes once a week. That's REI's commitment to getting people off the road. And then we absolutely must be working with our next door neighbors to see how we can partner on better transportation. And then we need our voice at Sound Transit and at the Key County Regional Transit Committee. Both of those are big boards that make big decisions about the big network, and right now Issaquah does not have a voice at either one of those positions. Fred Butler represented us very ably on the Sound Transit Board, and Kathy Huckabee from Sammamish represented this area very well on the Key County Transit Advisory Board. and we have no one representing us now. So there's a lot that we can do to improve transit in our area and make that more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to talk people out of getting out of their car, which is right in their driveway. Here, I just need to get in my car, and go. It takes planning to get into one of those other situations. So we really need to work hard to encourage people to consider those other alternatives and start using those other alternatives so that we reduce the number of cars on our roads.
All right.
And I think both of those would very much benefit the business community.
Well, appreciate it, Barbara. Nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you, and thank you for coming.
All right, thank you very much for the interview.
Yes. You're welcome.